At Dot and Company, we believe that all agencies deserve amazing account managers and that all of those account managers deserve to be supported, encouraged, and loved on. That's why we started CAM Community, a membership only for account managers. And inside, you'll gain access to the exact training we use to train our own client facing account managers, but also access to all of our SOPs, processes, and live trainings on a variety of topics. If you're an account manager, this is the place you've been waiting for. Learn more at dotandcompany.co/CAM community.
So I think it's very easy today to like blindly adopt someone else's definition of success. And I'm very guilty of this as well. And it takes inner work to figure out, well, what do you really want?
Welcome to the Happy Clients Podcast, brought to you by Dot and Company. Whether you're a virtual assistant, an agency owner, or a client-facing account manager, we all deal with clients. Lucky for you, client management is what we do best. Now, let's dig in, chat cam life, and have some fun along the way. Cheers to happy clients.
Well, I'm excited to podcast with you today, Greg. Welcome to the Happy Clients Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Taylor.
We were saying offline, we connected, I think it was 2019 when I just started Dot. And Greg, you were around for a while at that point, right? Like, I feel like you were really well known even in 2019. So you've been around the agency world for a while. Tell us about that.
I buzzed my head, so I don't have as many grays as visible. But yeah, I mean, our agency kind of went out on my own in 2014. And we started kind of what is now our current business really in 2017, 2018. So yeah, been around for a minute.
Yeah, you've seen agencies change a lot, I'm sure, over the years, right? I mean, things just change in this industry like on a dime. So what have been some of the things that you've seen happening in the agency space over the last few years? What's been changing for the good or maybe not the good?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I've found myself saying some catchy stuff like agencies are dead. Like we've all seen the YouTube videos that are like, are agencies worth it, et cetera. But I think like the big thing that I've noticed and kind of what we've, I guess, have hung our hat on as of recent is the fact that, I came from like agencies that were a part of Omnicom, right? Like we worked with like Pepsi and like professional sports teams and like true full service agencies that have been around for like decades. And so when I talk about something like that, I use the word, and I think a lot of us do, like the traditional agency. And I think what I've noticed is a lot of agencies that got started in the last like 10, 20 years, they kind of followed the model that they had seen from those sorts of companies where it's like, hey, like we kind of have to be full service or at least a la carte and like do whatever our clients need. But when you look at those sorts of companies from like I say the days of old, they're still around, but like they actually had 10 to 25 clients a year, and each client's worth like 6 or 7 figures a year. And so, to be full service when your client is paying 6 and 7 figures a year, like makes sense. Like you are kind of the agency of record. That was kind of the thing, right? But the transition that I've seen is like we've continued to become and brands and businesses and our clients, like they continue to want more specialists. They don't need the full service. And you also see this when like everyone's winning. Like we've seen the agency markets like kind of consolidate. A lot of people are like struggling last year into this year in some ways. It's like, well, big brands, when everyone's winning, yeah, if they can have everything under one roof, that sounds great. But like they're not getting everything under one roof done well. And so they make those sacrifices. And so when there's like a recession or things like that, what do? They fire the agency of record and they go find specialists for the actual things that they need. Right. And so just the rise of specialization and like deep specialization, which has led to productization of these services, I think is where you start to see a lot more agencies. But even more so than that, I'd say our world is way different now than like even when I got started in agencies in like 2004, meaning like you have agencies, so like service provider on one side, and you have like SaaS products on the other side. But then you have like consulting, and we have the creator economy, and you have tech-enabled services. And it's like the lines between what each of those actually means today is so blurry. And I think that's to our advantage as a provider, right? Like, why not use AI and technology to make your delivery fulfillment faster, more efficient? Like, I see some agencies like poo-pooing on some of these things, and it's like, no, you should actually use these things yourself because you'll be more profitable and you can do it with less people. And so I think there's like this opportunity of like information, software, service, like where does all that meet to kind of get your clients the results that they want? And I think a lot of people are just scrambling to figure that out right now.
I agree. It's so funny because I was chatting with somebody recently who's just starting their agency, and they come from one of these big agency backgrounds, and they're talking about RFPs and all these like big things. And I'm like,
Ugh.
that's so not who we
Yeah.
are. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's going to be such a hard business to grow, like going after these big clients that want RFPs. And it's great, but like we're talking about, like you said, the specialized agencies who are really freaking good at what they do. And that is kind of our jam. But let's kind of
Yeah.
talk about the productization, because like you
Yeah.
and I were saying before we started recording, so many agencies are staying small because they're not productizing. So walk us through how you coach agencies in that space.
Yeah. So first, like simply, I think there's a lot of people that define productize differently. So for the sake of what I'm saying, I would say I define a productized service as a systematized or systemized, depending upon how you like to say it, way of turning your expertise into a clear outcome for your clients. So simply stated, a fixed price for a fixed outcome with a fixed turnaround time is like simply what a productized service is. Like, walk down the aisle, you see a box on the shelf, the front of it is the picture of what you're getting, it is the outcome. Like, we need to be able to think of our services like that. It can't be a blank box and we're like, what do you need? Let me paint that on the box. Oh, what do you need? Let me go get a different box, right? Which is how a lot of agencies operate. So if every client's unique, I would say that you're not probably delivering a productized service. But if you're selling the same outcome over and over and over again, that is productized. So as a definition, that's how I define it. So why I think that's important to your point of like, I mean, RFPs, like when I hear people that like have to deal with RFPs. So when you typically deal with a company who does RFPs, right? Like request for proposal, right? When you do everything for everybody, or you are full service or a la carte, whatever, and you have kind of a variety of types of clients you serve, it's extremely difficult, I think, to market yourself. And so you kind of have to rely on referrals, which are great. But the challenge is when you do everything for everybody, it actually becomes even more difficult for even a client who has paid you to refer you, because what you did for them might not look like what you do for someone else. And so they're like, oh, like maybe Taylor can help you with that. Like, I'm not sure, but you should chat. And then you get a bunch of unqualified referrals and you're like, this is such a waste of my time. And that's like the cycle. But when you are solving a fixed problem with a fixed outcome, you already know who has that problem. It's like, you don't need to sell an audit or anything like that. You can actually just say, hey, we work with this type of business. Do you have this problem right now? Yes or no? Yes. Oh, well, we might be able to help. Like, let's explore that. So targeting potential prospects is easier. And I think the thing that goes undiscussed, or at least under the radar, is back to like the simplicity of marketing. Like, we're sitting here on a show called Happy Clients, right? Like, doesn't take a lot of, rocket scientists to figure out that you probably have something to do with client delivery and client fulfillment, making happy clients. And so anyone who's looking to make their clients happy, a few Google searches or YouTube searches, and they're probably going to come across you. And so I think a key difference is when you productize, you go from responding to demand, which is like literally RFP world, to you actually can create demand. So like, we can have this conversation and we know that the people who need this conversation will be intrigued by potentially at some point in their buying cycle, a service from you, right? Because they're seeking information. So we're intentionally creating demand with even having this conversation for your business. And I think a lot of agencies can't and do not do that simply because they haven't productized yet.
I love that methodology of creating your own demand
Yeah.
because it's so true. And I never thought of it that way. You're not just a blank slate, like whatever anybody needs. You're saying, here's what we do. If you want us, come get us. There's no discount, there's no customization, there's no extra offers. This is what we do, and this is how we do it. And I
For
love
sure.
that methodology. So there's obviously the sales side of productization, but what do you see on the back end of fulfillment?
Well, yeah. I mean, and you'll probably have a lot to add to this, but like the common situation that I see with agencies that are coming from, say, like not specialized in a particular market or type of client, and or they do a la carte services, if each client is different, this is where you see like hey, you're really good at your craft, whatever that is. Like you started your business because you're a good practitioner, but once you start taking stuff that's a little bit outside that expertise, you have to go higher. And so I see a lot of these people that in too early of days in their business, they're having to also learn how to become a manager while also figure out sales, while also figure out marketing. And like, they're not good at managing yet, like, which is fine. They haven't done it enough. And so like, they're trying to lead people on skills and to do other practices that they're not familiar enough with. And they're really just abdicating. Like, hey, can you do this for me? And those people typically cost a lot more. And so, meaning you're paying most of what you're making out to somebody else and not making enough to show for it. And most times people don't see that until way later. And so when you're like, hey, we do this fixed outcome, what you're able to do is say, oh, that's interesting. In order to get this outcome, we always follow the same 5 steps. And we always do those 5 steps. Well, when you start looking at those 5 steps, there's like activities and tasks within each of those. And when you start chunking it out, you're like, oh, I can actually hire someone that's super affordable to do these chunked out tasks that takes it off of my plate and gives me my time back as the founder. And so I think like the ability to replace yourself inside of delivery while finding like the profitability and the efficiency is just simpler when you do less things and you always do it in a similar way, right? Like following the same 5-step process. You typically will need less people, which usually means less headache and overwhelm. And again, anyone that's listening, if you've done something 10, 15, 20, 30 times, like the 30th time, you probably do it faster and better than the first time, right? And so like every new client, you actually are in most cases like optimizing and refining that process over and over, which means the next client is always going to be faster, more efficient, more profitable than the one before it. And so it's like, it kind of creates this like compounding efficiency that you just don't get when you are custom and every project starts from scratch.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think agencies aren't doing this? Why are they not productizing?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. For the creative service providers, because we end up working with a lot of those, I think they think that, and actually, I don't think they think, I know they think this because we have these conversations. They think that by productizing, they eliminate creativity. And that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, like you actually have to become more creative in how you solve problems. And so I think it's like the balancing of how can I still be creative and get the satisfaction that comes from my creative brain while still following a process. So I think that's like a big struggle that like leads people that are in more of a creative service profession to like more slowly adopt this because they think that they're going to not enjoy it anymore. But having worked with motion designers, video marketers, website designers, logo, graphic designers, like we've worked with a ton of creatives, like that is almost rarely ever the case. Like they find efficiencies, they find fun. It doesn't mean that every client is going to have the same logo. That doesn't make sense. Like there's still customization that happens. It's just not every client is getting a different deliverable or a different outcome, right? Fixed outcome doesn't mean it has to look and feel the same for every client. But like if one client's getting a website and the next client's getting a motion graphic, like those are two entirely different things. And your process to deliver each of those, the talent that you need, the cost of delivery for each is going to look different. And like, that's what we're talking about. So I think that's the first one. And then I think the second reason is that honestly, some people in early days, I don't think it benefits you to productize too soon. What I mean by that is like, I had to, work with a variety of clients, doing a variety of things to figure out what I liked, what I was good at, what they valued. Could I get them results consistently? Do I like that type of client? Before I was able to focus, right? And so I think early days, it makes sense to have that variety to figure it out, but it very quickly will become your handicap if you don't specialize. So depending upon your season of business, it might make sense for you to keep dating around and trying some different things to figure out who you want to work with, what your true value proposition is, to then go all in. That would be like the other reasons, like maybe you're just not ready to productize yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I find, because we productized a few years ago, and we found that not only does it give you more confidence in what you're delivering, but it takes out one decision, right? Like the decision fatigue of as a agency owner is crazy. And if
Yeah.
you can eliminate that decision of constantly, figuring out your offer for every client, then you can hire the right people at scale, like you were talking about. You can create the systems, you can optimize your sales process, you can hire someone to do sales for you. If you don't productize, no one on your team is on the same page. Everything is just starting from scratch every day. And it doesn't allow you to ever get to a point where you can remove yourself. Maybe that's not your goal, but I know for me, I didn't want to spend every day grinding on sales or grinding on, creating offers. So it's just been a total game changer.
Totally. And again, I think the creative people are usually the ones that tend to struggle with that. I was just catching up with an old client, Erin. She has a UI UX company. And her being able to get out of sales because she productized, like she was able to standardize the sales process that allowed her to hand that over to somebody else. She was allowed to hand over how her involvement in onboarding a new client. And then what did she get to do? She got to go grow the business. And she said that there's this balance of hey, I'm now not involved in some of the creative stuff, but I'm still overseeing a creative business. And I get joy in watching our clients get what they need. She's like, but I'm also not always the best person to do the work. We've hired really talented people. So when you chunk out that process, there might actually be processes that someone else might actually be better at, which would lead to your client being happier, and you're not involved in it, right? But you can still be a part of the process. So I think that there's a lot to be said for it. And yeah, so productizing, also look at it from the perspective of, you were talking earlier offline about bringing on an integrator. I know a lot of agency owners that hey, if you want to be involved in your craft and you can get it to be productized, systematic, you can still choose to be in part of the creative. Maybe you're still the creative director, but that means that you probably need to hire a general manager. So maybe you aren't the one to become CEO. You'll have to wear that hat for a little while, but that doesn't mean you have to be the CEO. You can go hire someone that's going to do those things, and you can become creative director or whatever component role you want to be. But the business will still need that eventually from someone, whether it's you or somebody else, if you want to grow beyond just being a freelancer.
Totally. And I think we hear this all the time because agency owners will come to us to hire an account manager, but they're also kind of nervous. They're like, I don't want to be fully removed. Does this mean I'm completely gone from the client management? It's
Yeah.
No, you don't have to completely run away from this one role. If you still want to do strategy, love that for you. Come on in. But you shouldn't be doing the other 80% of the client management work because you're not good at it. And it kind of shows you, right? If you productize and you figure out the little sliver of the business that brings you joy and you're really good at, just do that. You shouldn't be doing everything else because it's not efficient for your clients or your team or your profitability or your sanity, really.
Totally.
So obviously you have done such a wonderful job of helping all of these clients with different processes and productizing, but you've also done it for your own business where you're
Yeah.
able to have
Yeah.
a team in place so you can go enjoy the kids, maybe climbing mountains. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
tell us about that and kind of some wins that you've seen.
Yeah. I mean, again, like I don't want to say it's easy, but it does become simpler when you have that, hey, we always follow this process. This is who we serve. This is who we don't serve, because it makes finding the people to remove yourself as the founder from specific parts of the business a lot simpler. There's less to train on, there's less variability. You don't need to go have the person that has equivalent experience as you, which is like often rare. Like if you're trying to find another you, like why wouldn't they be having their own business like you just did? So it's like you need to find someone that's also good at that thing. So yeah, that has just allowed me to go find people to own different parts of the business operations, as well as specifically the delivery operations, that give me the ability to participate in the things that I think are my zone of genius. And so when you kind of keep building that out, well, then you should have some free time to
Mhm.
do other things. And so, yeah, I mean, I have two young kids. I'm a very avid mountain biker. We structure our days and weeks in a way where we don't have any calls on Fridays. So I typically work 4 days a week, unless I'm doing some sort of creative project and I choose to work on Fridays. I'm taking my kids to and from school almost every single day, which is amazing. And so like I have plenty of time to do the things that matter outside of business. And if I were still trying to meet every and any client demand, it would just still require so much of me that I don't think I'd be able to do those things, because I wouldn't be able to have such a structure to my schedule. And I see that with a lot of our clients that come in, right? It's interesting. Like, I don't know if it's the season, if you guys see this, but there was like the couple of years of, maybe it was when everybody was winning in like 2020 and 2021, was like the only goal for any and everybody was to hit like 7 and 8 figures. It was like, it was all a monetary goal. And now like everyone's talking and preaching like, I want to do this, but with, 20 hours a week of work or whatever. Our clients value priority first, their schedule, their freedom, and the ability to do what they want. And money usually comes second. And when that's the case, it's like, well, getting to the money that you need to live the type of life that you want is going to be far simpler if you just choose to focus on fewer things, which kind of tips back to like, well, then why not productize? If your priority is scheduling, having a life, and having the freedom, then stop doing all of the things that are taking that away from you, which is the begging and reaching for any type of project that will come your way. And there is a transition window. So I think like, some people have to just like navigate the messy middle of that transition, but it's definitely achievable to, have the 20 or 30-hour work week on only the things that you want if you just
Totally,
design it
totally.
that way.
Yeah, and it doesn't even matter how big your business is. Like I see agencies who are massive and they work, 15 hours a week, and the small
Yeah.
ones who also do the same, but it just comes down to systems, and it's really a mindset shift of what do you really want and are you willing
Yes.
to actually put the guardrails up to ensure that you're only focused on those specific things.
Yeah. So on the topic of something that you want, and I'd love your take on this, because what I've found, and I've been 100% guilty of this, is obviously people are listening to this show right now. Like we're going to see, any of us are going to see what, thousands of messages on Instagram or whatever between now and when we go to sleep tonight. Like we're influenced so much by everyone's highlight reel that I think it's very easy to get caught up in thinking like, is it what you want, or do you want to want it because you see other people that have it? And if we don't spend the time, which does require time and it's actually hard work to decide what we want for us, you'll just blindly adopt someone else's wants, right? So like, oh, like, why do I want a 7-figure business? Well, because everyone's talking about wanting a 7-figure business. Like, but like, why do you really want it? And it's like, at the end of the day, some of these people don't have a real valid answer for it, And look, I'm okay with if your answer is just because, like, sweet. But if that's actually the answer, then that's like, you would know that. But if like you actually have no real reason to want certain things or your life to be a certain way, it's likely because you've been influenced by somebody else. So I think it's very easy today to like blindly adopt someone else's definition of success. And I'm very guilty of this as well. And it takes inner work to figure out, well, what do you really want? And so one of my mentors said to me, everyone says for entrepreneurs, the hardest thing is knowing what you want. And he goes, I think that's actually BS. He goes, what I think is the hardest thing is admitting what you want. Because the second you actually admit what you want, you're going to get all of the judgment from all of the other people. Well, oh, Greg, you only want $2 million a year, but you could do so much better than that. Why aren't you going for 10? Or Greg, why do you need 2? You're going to live a great life at 500. And then you're going to start having to like navigate oh, well, someone thinks I could do better, but then I want less. It's like, so the admitting of what you want is when all the judgment comes. And if that's where like you start to lean either way, which I actually think is way more difficult than knowing what you want, because now it's like on display and you have to justify why what you want is okay. Which you obviously shouldn't have to do in the first place. But nonetheless, that's when I think we start to feel pulled in these different directions, is when you actually start sharing with the world what it is that you want. And it might not be in agreement with what other people think you should want.
Oof, that's so true.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that's so true. And I'm so guilty of it too. And I think if you're an overachiever, which a lot of us are, if you own an agency and own a business, you're naturally probably an overachiever.
Yeah.
I feel like we are way more influenced by external people being an overachiever because we just want to achieve the next thing. Yeah. And anytime you open Instagram, like you said, it's like the next, oh, I sold my business for whatever. And it's like, oh, well, maybe if I just work a little bit harder, maybe I could hit that multiple. And it's like, for what? Why? What is going to make you happy every day? And you're right. It's that figuring out what's important to you and admitting it. And it's not that can't change over time, but like
100%.
Understanding that you're doing it for you and nobody else. And that is hard.
Yeah. Your point right there, I think it's also something that I was guilty of, is like thinking that whatever we say that we want or the goal is, that means it's anchored to forever. And like, the reality is we live our life in seasons. Like I'm in the season of life where like my kids are 3.5 and 7. And like, I want to be as smart and I want to make as much money and profit as possible, but not at the expense of spending time with my kids and my family. So it's like, am I in like scale mode right now? No. That doesn't mean I'm not trying to make a ton more money than we are or grow the business. It's just I cut off at certain times because I'm making sure that a lot of my main priority, which is my personal life and my family, is still the priority. But like when they go to college or they're like not wanting to hang out with dad anymore, which, will probably be like high school. Like who says that I can't go say, hey, I'm still feeling good. I'm energetic. I'm pumped. Like, let me go scale now. Like, I mean,
exactly.
No one's like, you can't, like, it's okay to change what you want in different seasons. So I think that's also really refreshing, because every time I would get hung up on like, oh, well, if I make this decision, and then I would like fast forward through my entire life as if like I had to plan my entire life off of this one potential decision, which is like, well, you could just change your mind later. Why not just do that? So that kind of like took a ton of pressure off of me as I was kind of thinking through this, because, some of the people that you're going to see that are influencing you to maybe want something that you're not sure you want, like they might be in a completely different season. Kudos to the person who's 24 trying to hustle and get to, 10 million. I wish I was that way when I was 24, or I got started in this game when they got started. The world is different. I didn't kind of transition into this world at that time. So I can't compare my season 5 to someone else's year 7,
Yep. I love that. And I think it does take a lot of inner work, and that sounds so woo-woo, but I'm going through that right now. It's like, okay, you hit a point where you didn't think was even possible. Now what do you want? Like what's motivating you? And it's really digging deep into what those motivators are and not listening to the outside world and just figuring that out. So I really appreciate your perspective. Let's talk tactics for a second, because I know
Yep.
you help a lot of agency owners with different frameworks and whatnot. Walk us through kind of the foundational framework that you work with agencies on to help them kind of take their business to the next level.
Yeah. So thank you. A lot of our clients come to us where they are in a season of life where they're like, hey, I want to grow, but I don't want to grow, quote unquote, the traditional way, which typically looks like, well, in order to get X more clients, I need Y more people. They don't necessarily want a big team or a ton of overhead management. Um, they want a team. They don't want to watch their revenue go up just to watch their overhead and margin, like their margins shrink. And so what we kind of focus on is this framework called clients, members, and customers. And so clients are like that highest touch engagement, typically your core service, that hopefully is, a premium price and still profitable, but like the most access, the highest touch thing, you doing a lot of the stuff, right? So for most people listening, probably the core agency service. If you're a consultant, it probably is your consulting. Most of our clients, like, they only really need 25 to 50 people at that level to make a really, really good living. Maybe, probably like under 50. So we have this client, Rob, that they're doing basically $1 million a year with just their service. But he's like, I don't actually want to deal with the ramifications of having more clients. Because he came from kind of a similar world. And so what we look at is, okay, well, how do we grow your business without getting more clients? Well, let's package this decades of expertise that you have into training. And so training is our member layer. So if we like imagine a pyramid, at the top, there's clients, in the middle, there's members. And that's really like, hey, there's probably expertise that you're sitting on, intellectual property that you use to serve those clients. How do we expose that, codify it, and make it available to our ICP, our market, in a different vehicle that allows us to serve people with higher leverage? And so this is where we have clients. Typically, the next transition is, well, how do I offer training on my core service? So let's say you're a Facebook ads agency. Well, and you only want to have 50 clients where you're managing ads. Well, you can have a training offer that teaches, which is one of our clients, a training offer on how to train your in-house team to manage your ads, which is really interesting because a lot of Facebook ad agencies, if they suck, they're going to get fired. If they're really good, at some point, the client's going to want to bring it in-house. Who better to train them on how to bring it in-house than you? Well, so you had them at your client level. They want to bring it in-house, move them down to your member level, increase LTV, keep them around for another 6 to 12 months while you train their in-house team on how to manage and run the system that you just installed in their business. So like, how do you train on your core offer? That could be, a 2-day workshop. It could be an 8-week virtual thing. It doesn't really matter, but like, you're training on your core service, or you're training on things that are around your core service. So that Facebook ad agency example, I mean, I've worked with Facebook ad agencies. They know a lot about landing page conversion. They know a lot about coming up with new angles and hooks for content that makes content work in ads. They know how to build funnels, usually email sequences. A lot of that stuff's probably either given away for free in your core service, or you find yourself sometimes doing. Well, why not turn all of those into training? And hey, we have like the 8-week boot camp on launching this specific funnel, or hey, we have this membership where we're going to show you new creative ways to come up with content for your ads every single month. Like, it's building off of and around that core service, but like, that's a one-to-many deliverable, right? So like, you're going to see a ton of profit in that from stuff that you likely were already using, probably sitting in your Google Drive folder, if we're being real, right? And so you don't need to flex your team up by a ton of people just to support that layer. You might be able to use just yourself, or at least in the beginning, or existing team members that you already have. And you can sell those things for anywhere from, $500 a month to another, $30K a year, and double and triple your profits without equally increasing your overhead, right? So like, there's a lot of different training, consulting, coaching programs, membership inside of the member layer. And then there's the customer layer, which is like, well, if you have a methodology, you can probably sell a book, or you could sell a course, or I bet you Taylor has a really cool client tracking template that a lot of people would probably want to buy for like $50 or $100. Like the things that require zero humans to deliver, those could be things that you sell as like, that would be a customer. So like there's really three different types of buyers. There's people that want like knowledge, which is where the customer layer shows up. There's people that want implementation of stuff, which is usually the member area. And then there's people that kind of want like the whole shebang, which is, you know, the smaller subset of who you work with, which is those clients. And so when you have a suite of services and products that complement each other for the type of outcome you want to get your client, you can actually grow to a really high profits and even revenue without just having more clients, because you can have members and customers. And so we have like a joke. It's like, imagine you had 10 customers that paid you, you know, $500,000 a year. Not uncommon for a service provider. But then you add on 100 members a year that are paying you another 10 grand a year. And then you add on 1,000 customers buying a $50 template. Like, you have a pretty diversified offering with high revenue, high profit, that can be ran probably with a team of 4 or 5 people. And you kind of have the best of the both worlds from I can scale, but I'm scaling through intellectual property versus just people. And I think if you're an expert at what you do, you're sitting on at least 6 figures annually from just the member layer alone, like the training component. So we're helping a lot of our clients build out their suite of offers kind of in that clients, members, customers framework.
I love it. So just picking your brain here, we have our core service. We have a membership. We used to have a shop that would have one-off things. How do you make sure it's not confusing or you don't give them too many options?
Yeah, great question. So imagine that triangle again, clients, members, customers. We build down to scale up. So like we start with the client offer, we dial that in. We want to refine that. Then we want to look at what is that to then figure out what would be the member component that would complement that, dial that in. What is the customer elements that we can typically unbundle from the member and or the client area that become the customer offers. I see a lot of people jump to, oh, I have this cool template, let me go sell that. But like it almost is for a different avatar all completely. And it's like, well, now you kind of have like a product business for this person, but everything else you do is for this avatar. So like when we build down the pyramid, you'll find more of the complementary stuff. And usually in the beginning, I'm only trying to have like one offering for each of those. And again, how does it not get confusing? Well, you still have fewer, I mean, maybe one of each, so 3 offers. And they typically will meet the needs for your, I don't know if you guys look at your like ICP in tiers, but for example, I have a client where they do the Facebook ad. He doesn't technically do Facebook ads, but I'm just going to use this example. I'm going to layer his situation to the Facebook ad analogy. So you run Facebook ads, but you run Facebook ads for e-com stores that are doing at least 30K a day in product sales. So while your training could teach people the basics to get to 30K a day in sales, right? So it's like your training prepares them to be at the level in which they might need your higher level services. So like that's an approach, not the only approach, but one way to say, how do I train them to become qualified for my main thing? Well, they might need these funnels or, you know, these things or whatever in place. They only need these 3 campaigns to kind of get that. They don't need all the fancy Facebook ad stuff. They need these 3 campaigns working really well. So I'm going to train them how to get these 3 campaigns live. And so now you're kind of preparing them to be qualified for the next thing. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So we kind of got to look at like, not that we're trying to play the ascension game, but like we have to ask ourselves, like, where does this fit? Like, does it fit in kind of the hierarchy of where my people are currently asking for help?
Mhm.
you know, what sort of problems they have. And so you might have buyers of your current core service that are, you know, what sort of things are they asking 6 months before they're ready for your core service? Well, maybe there are some products or courses that might actually help them and make them go from needing your core service 6 months later to 3 months.
Mhm.
Like that's how I would kind of be thinking about, like, does this make sense to be offering it?
Mhm.
And the last like anecdote on this is when I said build down to scale up, many of us have seen like the $27 offer with an upsell and an upsell. So 5 years ago, I'd say even 3 years ago, if you saw anyone doing that, that was a clear sign that they were in scale mode because they had to offset their acquisition. Like that was a scale tactic, which is still a very viable scale tactic. So like selling the course or the template to then upsell them is really just they're trying to cover their acquisition costs, right? But I think there's a new reason to be doing that. And so this could mean maybe you accelerate that customer offer sooner is people don't trust anybody right now, depending upon your market. And so you might just need to have something to give them a little bit of a taste to like
Yep.
show that you know what you're talking about and demonstrate your expertise. One of our clients does brand identity, and it's like a $65,000 offer. If you're just coming into his world, even if you want that, like you might be like, whoa, like I just met you. So he's been rolling out these low ticket brand workshops that a few $100, and he kind of takes you through brand principles and why some people jump into this and they don't get results and like what makes a good brand. And like he has so much interest from his list already of people that like probably will buy his 65K thing at some point, but they're like hesitant to just drop 65K out of the gate, not knowing everything. And so
Mhm.
like you see their approach, you see how they do things, you get to interact. Like that's going to give someone, at least a percentage of them, the trust to buy. Someone bought my $100 workshop. They're like, oh my God, I vibe with you. And they give you $5,000 for the next thing, you know, a few weeks later. They just needed a taste. So I think there's like different buyers now too. And so reasons to have these as a service provider, especially if your only thing is the most expensive, like getting people in the door somehow, there's something to be said for that in today's market.
Mhm. I love that you said nobody trusts anyone because it's so true, and I feel that too as a
It's low.
consumer.
I'd say trust is low right now.
It is, it is. So my brain is turning of like ways that we can implement some of these things as well. Cool. Well, this was such a great conversation, Greg. I feel like we could talk for another hour. But how can agency owners learn more about what you're up to? I know you have a killer YouTube channel. Tell us about all about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Go on YouTube, search Greg Hickman, or you can go to gregsvideos.com and it'll redirect you right to my YouTube channel. We do videos on these topics every single week. So if you're enjoying this sort of content, good chances you'll vibe with that content. So check that out first. Then you'll know if you like and trust me.
I love it. Look, using his own
Yeah.
methodologies.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Greg. It was so good to reconnect. And thanks
Yeah.
for
Thanks,
coming on the
guys.
show.
Appreciate you.
Cheers to happy clients.